Anger reignites in the streets of Beirut. The resignation of Lebanon's prime minister has not stopped protests against the government in the wake of a deadly explosion. A manhunt is underway in Niger for a group of men who killed 6 French tourists and their 2 guides. The French military is playing a role as prosecutors in Paris launch an investigation. And press freedom under attack in Hong Kong, 11 people taken into custody, including the territory's most prominent pro-democracy media tycoon. Hello everyone, I'm Monty Francis with the latest world news from Paris. The resignation of Lebanon's prime minister has done little to quell public rage in the streets of Beirut. Hassan Diab has cited endemic corruption in the government and said he made the decision to step down so he could stand with the Lebanese people and fight for change. The announcement follows the resignation of 3 government ministers and comes in the wake of a massive explosion that killed 160 people and left 300,000 homeless. In spite of the resignations, there are real doubts about whether an independent government in Lebanon can be formed. Earlier, we spoke to Nadim Houri from the Arab Reform Initiative about the challenges that lie ahead.
Constitutionally, it's possible, and the challenge is, can it be done politically? Because the current parliament is dominated by the existing political class, and they will not want to cede power. But you can imagine, I think the search should not be for talented individuals. The search should be for what is the program, what is the platform, what is the agenda to rescue Lebanon. And then you can actually build a team that can have the trust, first and foremost, of the Lebanese, and 2, actually of the international community. Now, to reach that point, to build this independent government that has this trust, you somehow have to convince the existing political class, the oligarchs, to actually sit this one out. Can we do that? I think I can see one scenario where this could succeed, which is the street pressure continues unabated, as we're seeing right now. And in parallel to this street pressure, we actually see international pressure on the oligarchs, potentially threatening their ill-gotten gains and assets outside of Lebanon if they don't give a chance for a proper salvation government. The idea is not to actually exile them all from politics. We cannot do that. They will have a chance to contest the next elections in 2 or 3 years. But the priority right now is to get them to lift their hands off the government to allow actually someone to save the sinking ship.
And as he just mentioned, since the end of the country's civil war, Lebanon has been run by oligarchs. Protesters blame them for decades of corruption and negligence. As Selena Sykes explains, they won't so easily give up their power.
After the government's resignation, protesters now have Lebanon's oligarchs in their sights. From the president to businessmen and former army chiefs, all of them want to hold on to the sectarian political system for their own benefit. Among them is Nabi Berri, a Shiite who's been the Speaker of Parliament for 27 years. The millionaire is accused by protesters of corruption. He's said to have a hold on various Lebanese institutions, including the social security system. According to this former Shiite minister, Berri widely practices cronyism to extend his influence.
نبي بري عنده لكل واحد وظيفة ببلش بالدكتور للمتعلم للأمي بلاقي له وظيفة لدرجة معينة صحيح وهناك فساد كبير.
It's impossible to get close to Nabi Berri's residence. According to his critics, his henchmen are never far away. This video was filmed by protesters a few roads away from Berri's home. Despite complaints, there's been no investigation.
Le procureur est nommé par un proche de M. Berri. Personne ne va aller faire des poursuites contre celui qui est son chef de clan, son leader, celui par lequel il a acquis sa position. Voilà comment fonctionne le système.
Every religious community has a leader who's had a grip on power for years. They refuse to oust them because they're scared their sect will lose ground, like these Shiite residents in Beirut.
Tous là, ils partent. Nous, on accepte que Berri parte. Mais tant qu'eux, ils sont là, Nous restons.
Lebanon's oligarchs support each other in order to hold on to power, a deeply entrenched system that will be hard to break.
An Algerian journalist who covered the country's pro-democracy movement has been sentenced to 3 years in prison. The court convicted him for inciting unauthorized demonstrations and attacking national unity. As Karen Garland tells us, the sentence has sparked outrage among activists and civil rights groups.
Covering pro-democracy protests in Algeria, Khaled Drani said he was just exercising his right to inform. But on Monday, an Algerian court sentenced him to 3 years in prison and a fine of more than €300. His lawyer labelled the ruling unjust.
ومتفاجئين جدا بهذا الحكم اللي نعتبره بأنه قاسي ولا يستند لقانون لأي قانون وطبعا سنقوم باستئناف هذا الحكم.
The 40-year-old was arrested in March on charges of inciting an unarmed gathering and endangering national unity. Two co-accused in the trial, both protesters, were sentenced to 2 years each. Reporters Without Borders said the Algerian regime was sending a message to journalists telling them they can't act freely.
Khaled will from now on be a symbol of this authoritarian regime in Algeria. The President Tebboune, the current Algerian president, promised that there would be a new Algeria, a democratic Algeria. This is exactly the contrary.
Protests that began in February last year called for the removal of the current political class and an end to corruption. They pushed former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika to step down in April 2019 and continued after Abdelmajid Tebboune succeeded him in December. The demonstrations were brought to a halt only by the coronavirus outbreak earlier this year.
In Niger, the French military is assisting in a manhunt for the killers of 6 French tourists and their 2 guides. Meanwhile, prosecutors in Paris have launched an investigation into the attack. On Sunday, a group of men on motorcycles opened fire on a tourist vehicle, killing everyone inside. The attackers have not been identified, but jihadist groups such as the Islamic State are known to be active in the region. Nicholas Germain has the latest.
This was the car that belonged to the NGO Acted. It was found in the Kouré region southeast of the capital Niamey. The driver and a guide were from Niger, the 6 humanitarian workers were French, all were killed by an armed group. The victims had come here to observe giraffes. The army and forensics are on site. This man is the uncle of the deceased guide. He spoke to him just before the attack.
irman bai hala mota no gogo to nir ban yo wodi nanga zankai ner se wallahi dullu no arka dullo jarga dullo risba danga kilo focine.
In Paris, the NGO Acted gave a press conference. It stressed that its employees had not gone to a red zone. They are the areas which the French government advises against visiting.
La zone de visite, etc., est une zone où, classiquement, toute la communauté internationale basée à Miami va le week-end. Comité international, diplomate, que sais-je, et qui, jusqu'à présent, et jusqu'à hier, n'avait connu aucun incident de sécurité.
French anti-terror prosecutors said they would investigate charges of murders with links to a terrorist enterprise. It's the first attack targeting Westerners in this area southeast of Niamey. The region has attracted tourists for 2 decades, ever since it became a sanctuary for rare West African giraffes. Most of the jihadist attacks in Niger take place north of the capital, in the area called the Three Frontiers, along the borders of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso.
Now to the U.S., where a shooting near the White House led Secret Service agents to abruptly escort President Trump out of the press briefing room. After several minutes, Trump returned and explained that law enforcement had shot someone. Authorities say the shooting took place near 17th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue, just blocks from the White House. The person who was shot is said to have suffered critical injuries, and police suggested the individual may have had a history of mental illness. Trump praised the Secret Service for keeping him safe. At least one protester has died in violent clashes with police in Belarus. This follows widespread accusations of fraud in the wake of a presidential election there. Supporters of the opposition have clashed with police in the wake of the results. The German Foreign Ministry is the latest to call the re-election of Alexander Lukashenko into question after the Election Commission in Belarus said he had won in a landslide. Now to Hong Kong, where police have arrested 10 men and 1 woman in a crackdown on press freedom. Among those in custody, the city's most prominent pro-democracy media tycoon, Jimmy Lai. His publication, The Apple Daily, has been critical of China's ruling Communist Party. Lai is the most prominent figure to be arrested under the territory's new sweeping national security law.
Another pro-democracy activist arrested under Beijing's national security law. Police escorted Agnes Chow Ting from her home on Monday evening. A post on her Facebook page claimed she had been followed by unknown agents and a camera had been installed near her door and then removed. Chow is among 10 people arrested in the same day, with journalist Wilson Lee and media tycoon Jimmy Lai also in police custody. On Monday, more than 200 police officers searched the offices of Lai's Next magazine and Apple Daily newspaper. Prominent Hong Kong activist Joshua Wong warned the semi-autonomous city was facing an urgent situation, anticipating his own eventual arrest.
I hope this is not the last video before I'm arrested in the upcoming future. Perhaps the time for me to continue to fight for freedom in Hong Kong is already counting down. But no matter what happened, as a Hong Konger, I love Hong Kong a lot, and I will continue my commitment.
Wong and Chow had both appeared in court last week. Chow pleaded guilty on unlawful assembly charges relating to pro-democracy protests last year. Wong was indicted on similar charges, but pleaded not guilty.
Here in France, Paris is now requiring people to wear masks outdoors to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Masks are now required in several parts of the city, including crowded markets and streets. Violators face fines of €135. As Jean-Emile Jamin tells us, several other French cities have decided to do the same.
It's not just public transport and indoor spaces anymore. Now masks are compulsory in many outdoor parts of Paris.
Correct, normal de le faire. Je pense que si tout le monde était discipliné, ça marcherait bien, quoi. On pourrait effectivement arriver à bout de cette maladie, me semble-t-il.
Vu qu'on ne comprend pas grand-chose à cette maladie, le mieux on se protège et les petits efforts peuvent avoir de gros impacts.
The new measures were imposed after a significant rise in COVID cases in and around Paris, with new daily infections nearly twice the national average. Among the places masks must be worn are popular shopping streets, open-air markets, the banks of the River Seine, as well as the famous hill of Montmartre. A €135 fine applies to those who don't comply, leaving some residents bemused.
La contravention n'a jamais guéri du Covid. Donc, qu'on mette une contravention, pourquoi pas, si c'est la norme, admettons-la, mais qu'en contrepartie de quoi, une fois qu'on a verbalisé quelqu'un, on lui donne son masque. Voilà, c'est ma logique.
Along with Paris, the likes of Marseille, Lille, Nice and Toulouse have already made mask wearing obligatory in their city centres. The glamorous French Riviera resort of Saint-Tropez also imposed orders on Saturday. For many visitors though, wearing a mask right now is a small commitment in the hope of avoiding something greater down the line.
C'est nécessaire pour se protéger, pour protéger les autres. Voilà, il faut peut-être accepter cette contrainte pour peut-être éviter de retomber dans un confinement à la rentrée des vacances.
Tout sauf confinement une deuxième fois, quoi. C'est pas grave.
The latest measures apply to everyone over the age of 11 and are set to last a month, but could change depending on the trajectory of the virus.
What's being described as a tragedy for the environment is on the brink of becoming even worse. Salvage crews are racing against the clock as a Japanese oil tanker has begun to split apart. The boat ran aground off the coast of Mauritius on July 25th and has since been leaking fuel into the water. More than 1,000 tons has already spilled of the 4,000 tons on board. Helicopters are attempting to airlift fuel from the ship, but those efforts are being hampered by bad weather. And that's it for this edition. Stay tuned for more world news here on France 24.